All right, welcome. Thank you for coming to our session. My name is Dave Randall. I'm a program manager in the Intune engineering team, and I'm joined by
David Folkus. I'm a PM in our customer experience engineering team. The same product group as Dave, but we are a team that goes out and looks after our amazing customers and help them deploy and use Intune.
So it's kind of the Dave Squared show at the end of the day. And I know that we're the last session between you and dinner, your parties, the rest of the evening. So hopefully you'll find you've got a ton of great information here before you go on with the rest of your evening. As I was thinking about this particular session, one of the things that actually Intune is delivering, and you see a lot of this throughout the Ignite session, is we've got some really cool, fun, amazing things that you're delivering to your end users. And I kind of equate that to the deck chairs and the slides and all of the interesting things that sit on top of the ship. But in fact, most all of you operate down in the engine room. And sometimes the features and capabilities that we show for Intune don't really cater to those of you that are working in the engine room. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to spend some time today and talk about those different capabilities in Intune that you need to manage and run Intune as a service. First off, we'll start out with reporting. I'll talk a little bit about in-console reports and some of the features that we have for data warehouse. Then we'll spend a little bit of time, I've got auto, somehow we have auto forwarding. Okay, so the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off, apologies for this, using timings. Okay, so demo snafu out of the way. First off, we'll talk about reporting, getting data to and from your tenant. Second, we'll talk about role-based access control. I know a lot of you are using this today, but I want to give you some specific guidance in how you can right-size permissions for all of your IT staff, no matter whether they're centralized or decentralized around the world. Then we'll talk about automation. Automation is absolutely key for you in making sure that your Intune service is running well, so we'll spend some time on that. And then we'll get to auditing last. Now, auditing's super kind of boring in and of itself, but I'm going to give you some great ways that you can understand exactly what's happening for your tenant, and we'll leverage auditing along with automation. So first off, let's start with reporting. Reporting is fairly basic in the console today. You can view, sort, filter, you can export these list views. They're not particularly compelling in and of themselves, so maybe some of you have discovered that you can also use a Graph API. And Graph API, or maybe PowerShell, allows you to extract exactly that same information, and you can sort, filter, and query and do things like push it over to whatever tool you want or data store you want. We've also got a new reporting endpoint that's accessible via Graph or PowerShell. This reporting endpoint has some built-in canned reports for you, so you don't have to necessarily aggregate and summarize the data yourself, but you'll see it show up in the Intune console, and it's basically real-time data. So what I want to do in just a little bit as we get to the demo is I want to show you some of that. But we've also got the Intune Data Warehouse. Now, the Data Warehouse is where you're going to get access to information that Intune has captured day by day by day and summarized for you and made available in a historical format. That information, actually, because we're consolidating it, you may find more valuable and helpful than just your daily operation information that's shown in the console. We'll have up to 90 days of data available, and that'll be rolling information in the Data Warehouse. I'll spend a little bit of time on Power BI, and Power BI is one of the great tools that allows you to extract that data from the data warehouse, make some great presentations and visualizations for the rest of your IT staff and executives who want to view what's going on in Intune. One last call out, there is a data warehouse session tomorrow at 10 o'clock. If you're interested in the Power BI, I'd encourage you to go to that theater session. We'll do a deep dive into some of the capabilities, which I'll just touch on briefly here. So Dave's gone over to the Intune console, and I want to spend just a quick bit on reports. So let's go look at the list of devices. This list view is pretty basic. You've got, for all devices, you've got a set of columns. You can sort, filter, and so forth. But actually, what I'd like to do is I'd like to make this a little bit more usable for me. So if we go to the columns, and down very at the bottom is a new field called management name. I'm not sure if you guys have discovered this yet, but management name is a friendly name. I don't know why we call it the management name, I'd rather call it the friendly name, but it's called the management name. So we're going to enable that. And actually, I prefer that rather than the device name that shows up as the first column. So we're going to move that guy all the way up to the top. We can just drag and drop that to rechange the order. So we're going to change the order. We're going to turn off the device name, go ahead and choose apply. And we've got somewhat of a more appropriate list view or report in the console. And of course, this gets saved session to session, so this will be your view going forward. So that's great. We have the ability to do our basic list view here. The other thing that we can do if we want is, let's go switch over to data warehouse. So data warehouse gives us the ability to look at all of that rich, historical, summarized information. So here I'm in Power BI, and we've got some new capabilities that we're launching for Power BI that give you these reports that I'll show you. So I'm looking at a list of the different Power BI reports that are available for me. Now, the reason why this is particularly interesting is because if you've got a proof of concept environment or a pilot environment, which is separate from your production environment, you can list all of those here, all in one place. So you have a single entry point for all of your different tenants that are connecting with Power BI to your backend. So let's go take a look at the very top one, our admin view. And this administrator view gives us a snapshot of what our environment looks like today. The device ownership pie chart, kind of interesting because if I select one of those individual wedges, it now changes the rest of my entire view. So I've focused myself by doing an automated filter based on the pie chart to just that specific set of information. So I could do personal, corporate owned, or what have you. So that's an interesting, just high-level view, new capabilities that we've got available for these reports. Now, the next thing that I want to take a look at is our enrollment troubleshooting. A lot of you have users that, for whatever reason, their enrollment has failed, and you need to understand what's going on. So over on the far left-hand side, you'll see all of the individual reasons why enrollment had failed. And one of them is kind of interesting. There's the user abandonment. Our users looked, they got somewhere in the process and they said, too bad, so sad, I'm not really interested in this anymore, and we want to figure out what happened. So when Dave clicked on the user abandonment, you notice down in the trend of enrollment, we've got the red line that all of a sudden spiked in the last couple of days, and it turns out that that coincided with a rollout of a new change. So obviously, our users didn't understand what was going on. So this is a quick and easy way for you to get a simple snapshot of what failures are happening for your enrollment and maybe dive in a little bit deeper to what specifically was going on. Now, the last thing I want to show you is app protection policies. Many of you are using MAM for your users so that they can have their own personal device. But it's oftentimes interesting for you to understand which applications they're using. So this is exactly the view that you're getting. Day by day, you can see that you've got application usage, in this case in the tens of thousands per day, and it's broken out by each of the different applications. So maybe I'm interested in just focusing on Excel. So I can select Excel, I can select the Manage Browser, and we can see specifically for those two particular applications how many people are launching them. All right, so that's my very quick whirlwind tour of Power BI reporting and reporting in the console. So let's switch back, and we'll take a look next at role-based access control. Role-based, or we'll look at the sky at night.
Dave number 2 is figuring out, there you go.
Okay.
It's number 5.
All right, so role-based access control. Many of you are leveraging role-based access control in a variety of different ways between Azure Active Directory and Intune. And I want to walk you through just some basic principles, and then we'll talk about some new features. So in Azure Active Directory today, you have global administrators. From one level down below, you have Intune administrators, and you may have conditional access administrators and other administrators for different services. Below that have fewer permissions, are your Intune roles, and you may have a scenario-specific role such as App Manager, Policy Manager, Read-Only Operator, Help Desk Operator. So this is our order of permissions. At the top, most permissions; at the bottom, least permissions. Our Azure Active Directory Global Administrator, in this case Glenn, has full permissions to all of our services, as well as Office 365. Our Intune Service Administrator, however, he has limited roles, limited permissions only within the Intune service. He can manage everything in Intune, see all the mobile devices, all the managed apps, all the configuration profiles, but now he has limited permissions for things in Azure Active Directory, such as users or managing group membership. Our Intune role, we've moved down to the very bottom of the stack that I showed. Our Intune Help Desk Operator role has limited permissions for a certain group of resources, such as configuration profiles. So any help desk operator, I'll just use Sally as my example here, she could view or read all of the configuration profiles, and maybe she needs to assign them out. So if somebody calls, they don't have the VPN profile, she can assign it out to them. In order to do that, she needs to be a member of the IT staff, that's her member group, and she needs to be able to deploy to a scope group, in this case, all Seattle users. So by where we are today, Intune roles allow you to be able to view and see all of the configuration profiles, but only deploy them to a limited group, which is your scope group. So I mentioned that I want you to spend a little bit of time and right-size your permissions. So let's take a segue into right-sizing permissions. First off, I want you to minimize your global admins. And a lot of you are saying, but Dave, I need global admins to be able to do specific things. Those specific things that I've been working with the Azure AD team, and what we're doing is separating out those specific permissions so that you can have a role that just contains that permission. They know, they understand this pain where you have many, many global admins. On average, you have 15 global admins. Some of you probably have quite a few more global admins, but I want you to minimize and keep track on this list of all of the new Azure Active Directory administrator roles and separate those out, give the people the limited administration permissions that they need to do their day-to-day job without requiring they be a global admin. If you're an E5 customer, privileged identity management allows you to do just-in-time elevation. So for those of you who have that capability, I encourage you to look at that and take advantage of that. The next thing, moving down, minimize your Intune admins. Now, fortunately, most of you only have, on average, 2 Intune administrators, so you're doing a pretty good job there. We can do a little bit better, though, because for our Intune admins in the Intune roles, you can actually grant every single permission necessary to manage the entire Intune service. You don't actually need the Intune Azure Active Directory role to be able to manage Intune. However, I know that most of you want an escalation or a backup or somebody who's there to be able to ensure they can manage the entire Intune service. So you'll probably have a couple of them, and that's okay, but I'd like you to leverage Intune roles to right-size permissions for your Intune administrators. And lastly, a new feature that we'll talk about, Intune scope tags. Intune scope tags are going to allow you to filter out the specific list of applications, policies, devices, profiles that are in your Intune tenant and just grant permission for those specific policies, profiles, applications, devices to a given administrator. So let's see. Did you leave this in?
Maybe.
Left it in? We're going to make them participate? Are you sure? I've got people from California, Ohio, Illinois. They're all going to participate?
Yep.
Okay. So here's what we're going to do. We worked this out. I'm going to say Intune PowerShell is, and you're going to respond, Intune PowerShell is?
About to be released in preview?
No, don't get ahead. Don't get ahead. Okay. Intune resources are, this is your cue. Intune resources are, holy cow, yeah. I have one voice and you have 213. Intune resources are, fabulous. Yeah. Intune permissions are, Intune members are, Intune scope groups are, and Intune scope tags are, amen. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So scope tags, we ended on scope tags. Scope tags will limit your access or your administrator's access to specific Intune resources. They're fairly simple to use. We're going to walk through the process of adding them to a role assignment and then tagging specific Intune resources. But what I really want you to remember is that tags are a way to filter out the specific objects in Intune for given administrators. And I know a lot of you have distributed IT, and this is going to work really well for you. We're going to map our role assignments with scope tags, and then we're going to define a scope tag for a given instance in Intune. So let's take a look at how this works. If we go back to our demo machine, 5, not 2.
7.
7. All right, so we're here in the console, and the first thing that we're going to go do is go down to Roles. And under Roles, you'll see a new menu item, Scope Tags. And the scope tag list that I've got here, I pre-populated, and hopefully one of these resonates with you, especially if you have distributed IT. I've got a bunch of cities. So these cities represent headquarters and maybe a regional area that I've got local IT, or maybe I've distributed my management of Intune between desktop and mobility. Or if I'm a state government, I might have a state centralized IT, and then I've got different agencies, and each agency has their own IT. Or down at the bottom, I might have a school district. Oftentimes, school districts have a single centralized IT, and then each of the individual schools have one or more administrators. So any one of these particular models may fit very well with you, and you're free to use whatever mechanism you want for scope tags. It's simply those two values, a name and a description. So you can create whatever you want for your scope tag that makes sense for you. So now that we've seen the list of scope tags, let's go add it to an administrative role. So if we take a look at Help Desk Operator and we look at the list of assignments, I've got an assignment here for Seattle Help Desk. And if we select Seattle Help Desk, remember there's 3 key elements to a role assignment: the members, and the members are our IT staff; the scope groups, and those are the users that can be targeted by important Intune stuff; and scope tags is the tag that helps tie together these administrators with specific Intune resources. So that's all you have to do on the role side. You'll probably spend a little bit more time than just this one role back at, when you get home. But now that you've got the role assignment done, the next thing that we're going to do is add a scope tag to a specific compliance policy. So if we go to compliance policies, you'll see we've got several of them. If we go to the list of compliance policies, you'll see several. They're named Seattle and Chicago. And then we've also got one at the very top, which is Android signage. So I have some digital signs that are available throughout my entire organization. That's what's intended to represent there. So let's go add a scope tag to one of the Chicago. Now wait a minute, before we do that, what we should do is check and see what our administrator in Seattle sees today. This is her view today. So let's go over to Sally. Sally's logged into the console here, and let's go to the same exact location, device configuration profiles. You want to look at her permissions?
Yeah.
Okay, he wants to look at our permissions. So as an administrator in Intune, you can go to the roles section and you can view my permissions. And this gives you a complete list of all the permissions for your role. And actually, we aggregate this across any role that you're assigned. So you'll see all of the different things that you can do as an administrator in Intune. So now that you know that Sally can view a list of device compliance policies, when we go to the list of policies, Sally's view is exactly the same as our administrator, Glenn. And it includes all of Chicago, Seattle, and our Android signage. So what our goal is to limit her view to only those things that matter to her, which is Seattle. So if we go back and we assign a scope tag to one of the profiles for Chicago, and I just so happen to have a scope tag called Chicago, so that it makes sense, we'll add Chicago, save that particular profile. And now that that profile is saved, it should disappear from Sally's view of the world, because that's now under the administrative control of Chicago. So let's go back and take a look and refresh the screen for Sally. Sure enough, I've only got 3 Chicagos. So Dave, I know, absolutely loves PowerShell, and I'm suspecting you've got a way to make this a little bit easier from an automated perspective.
Yeah, I was
So
going
walk us through that.
I was going to ask Dave, who wants to do this manually? setting scope tags manually? So I've got a few nods.
Nobody wants to do it manually. Everybody is here for PowerShell. Okay.
So as you saw, we've got all those scope tags, and if I go to one of my script repositories, we've got a script which will basically read all the scope tags that you've got created. It will then go through every compliance and configuration policy, and if the scope tag name, Seattle, matches the display name of the policy, it's going to go and set that scope tag. Okay? So if I run RBAC policy assign, it's going to ask me to authenticate. So let me just authenticate with this tenant. So this is the normal GitHub scripts that we do today. .com. It's going to ask me to authenticate with this tenant.
You have the wrong spelling. You have
Microsoft. It's going to ask me to authenticate. If I authenticate with my password, it's then going to loop through every single scope tag. So it's now looping through Seattle. It's found some compliance policies with the name Seattle. It's found some configuration policies with the name Seattle. It's found Chicago. That one was already set, so that's a demo we set. So the red error is the demo. We'd already set the scope tag manually in the UI. It's going to go through every single scope tag, and when it's finished, we're going to refresh the view of Sally and see what she gets. So now it's finished, or just about to finish, some worldwide policies. So if I log back in now to this tenant with Sally, you can see she has 8 policies, and I now do a refresh in the UI. She's now down to the 4 Seattle and the 1 Android signage. But Dave, why is Android signage still there?
So you didn't have Android or we didn't have any Android in our scope tag. So that Android signage does not have a scope tag assigned. So what it means to you is any of the resources that you've got that have no scope tags are visible to all administrators. And if you think about that, because scope tags were released last month, and your view hasn't changed because you haven't assigned scope tags, it makes sense. We didn't want to just all of a sudden make the world disappear out from underneath you.
So the next big one with automation is devices. So who's got more than 10,000 devices in Intune? Okay, do you want to do this manually?
Just still, again, no hands.
No hands. So if you look at devices, obviously in the device list, you've got a list of all your devices. And yes, you have to go into each individual one to change the list. So I've got a user, Dave, and Dave is actually in my Seattle group, my Seattle users group.
Good choice of names.
And all the other users are in my Chicago group. So what you can do from a script perspective, and hopefully this will help you, is I can run RBAC scope tags device assign. It's going to ask me for my group, so Seattle users. It's then going to read all the scope tags and go, hey, which scope tag do you want to assign? So I'm going to assign Seattle, which is number 12. And then it's going to find every user in the group. It's then going to find the user's devices in that group and assign the Seattle scope tag. But the thing is, the view from Sally is that we've just assigned the scope tag to Dave's devices. She will still see the rest of them. So let's run this again. And let's go Chicago users. And this time, I've got a few more users. So Peter's got a device. He's going to set Chicago for that device. Roxana, Eric, we've got Alex, we've got Ashka. Now those have applied to devices. The managed device one, the UI doesn't update instantly. So if I go to devices for Sally, so it will take a few minutes because we're just doing some work in the back end. But once this completes and you do a refresh, the devices list will be reset to just Seattle devices, which will be just Dave's devices. This can take a couple of minutes to do because we're doing a lot of work in the managed device backend to complete that action. So if you're thinking about why, if you think you've got 100,000 devices, it's going to take some time to tell our backend to then update the UI. So it'll take a couple of minutes, and then the UI will update. I will refresh, so it's actually done it. So there you go. All devices are now filtered just to Dave. And just to prove it, if I scroll across, I would have to add in, so David at Thunder Creek is the only user in the Seattle group. So that has done instant filtering on managed devices by just running a couple of scripts. So hopefully that is kind of opens up your eyes to the art of automation. We haven't even covered the automation section yet.
Right.
But this is the art of the possible. We'll put some of these sample scripts on GitHub tonight, tomorrow, minimum next week. But hopefully that will help you in your scope tag UI filtering journey. And we're really excited by this feature, so we hope you like it.
So one thing, Dave, you ran the script interactively.
Correct.
Can we show them a little bit later how to do it? Okay, we'll show them. All right, so let's go back and let's wrap up scope tags. So you saw how that works. The first thing that I mentioned was when you have no tag, that's the default behavior today. So anything that you create has no tag by default. You can only assign one of the scope tags that's available to you for your role assignment. So we saw that Sally had only that one scope tag. And in fact, if we go back, we don't need to do this, but if we go back to the UI and Sally goes to create a new compliance policy, the only scope tag she can assign is Seattle. She could leave it blank, but then it would be visible to everyone. So any objects that have no scope tag are visible to everyone. You can have more than one scope tag across role assignments, and we'll consolidate all of those. So you don't have to necessarily add 15 different scope tags if you've got distributed role assignments. Now our graph APIs, since we're talking about automation, graph APIs will honor scope tags. And what that means is that this isn't just something that sits in the UI. This is in the backend service. The scope tags are filtered even if you go to graph and you get a list of managed devices. So let's say, for example, we went to graph and we got a list of devices for Sally, logged in as Sally. She would only see my devices for those ones that we had assigned. She doesn't see any of the rest. So even for all of your PowerShell, for all of your reporting, anything that you're doing for graph, scope tags are going to filter that list for you too. So it's not just a UI thing. If you want to assign scope tags, just like Dave showed, you can also use the Graph API to do the assignment of scope tags. And just so that you make sure you've got an escalation path, any of your Intune Service admins or your global administrators have full visibility to all scope tags, have the ability to assign scope tags to any roles. They're basically your overarching administrator who has full control of all of the scope tags. So if you want to make sure that you've got somebody who can troubleshoot if somebody's scope tag seems to be filtering out, that's the role that you're going to use. So scope tags, let's see, I talked a little bit about the zero impact at rollout. So scope tags are already available today with the August release. You probably haven't seen any impact to you because we haven't auto-assigned anything. There's no role assignments that have scope tags, no resources. So everything is as is today. This is an additive feature that you can build. So Sally's view of the world looked something like this. She could see specific configuration profiles, applications, devices. She can target Seattle end users. So she's now fully containerized in the responsibility for her particular region and the people that she's managing. Just to demonstrate a little bit about what that looks like, Sally's view is of a single Seattle VPN profile. She can still view and assign that, but she can only assign that one profile to any of the Seattle end users. So this really gives you the fine-grained control over who can do what in Intune. When you get back, the first thing that I'd love for you to do is think about scope tags and start small. Probably one or two that make sense for your organization. You're going to assign, create those scope tags. Don't go crazy. I had a big long list for demonstration purposes, but start with one or two, figure out what it's all about. Assign those to a role assignment. That can be just one custom role assignment so that you understand how it works and then go add that to some resources. Get this vetted out in your proof of concept environment before you roll it out because your administrators will see limited views and they'll wonder what happened if things disappeared out from underneath them if they were unaware. The roadmap for scope tags, our current release covers config profiles, compliance policies, update rings, notifications, and managed devices. By the end of the year, we'll add the rest of applications and much of the dependent services or dependent features on applications. That's managed apps and mobile apps. And then the beginning of the year, we'll build in some automation for auto-assigning tags. So just like you saw the script run, we'll have some rules that allow you to auto-assign at enrollment time so that you don't need to worry about the automation yourself. All right, so let's move on to auditing. In auditing today, auditing is fairly straightforward. It has a per workload view of each of the different audit events that are created by your administrators. We have an RBAC permission that allows you to control who can see that audit data. We also have the last 30 days of audit data in the console. If you're interested in more, jump over to PowerShell or Graph. You can get the last year's worth of audit data and extract that out. And of course, you can do the same sorting, filtering, and so forth, and export data from the UI. But in fact, at least from the in-console view, this isn't all that particularly compelling, because oftentimes what you need to do is you need to understand who did what, when, from a security and event perspective. So Dave's been working on a little bit of automation. Let's cover what this is about. Azure Automation Accounts, you go. This is your thing. Don't let me interrupt.
So how many people want to take their auditing data from Intune into another solution? Okay, quite cool. So what the demo shows is, this is showing how to use automation accounts. And basically what we do with automation accounts is that we can use PowerShell runbooks. And from a PowerShell runbook, what we can do is we can then use Graph. Graph can then talk to Microsoft Intune and to pull back that auditing data. It can then return it to Graph, and then Graph will return it to the runbook itself. The runbook then can send that data to Log Analytics. So we're going to jump straight over to a demo. So that's it, kind of how it's constructed. So if I go over to the demo, if you go to compliance, you've got audit logs in the UI. So these are all the audit logs in the UI that happen on my tenant. So I've been quite busy playing with compliance policies. But I want this data to get over to Log Analytics so I can analyze it and I can create some beautiful charts. We like beautiful charts. So what we've got is, if you go over to automation accounts, I've got a runbook called Intune Auditing. And this Intune Auditing script is a PowerShell script. So if I just view this script, it is one of our scripts from GitHub. And what it will do is it will run get audit categories. So it will get every single audit category in the UI, compliance configuration, whatever we set. It will loop through it, and it will write the output back from the runbook. This runs on a daily schedule, so every 24 hours this runs. So every 24 hours we write the output. That output is then sent to Log Analytics. So if I jump over to Log Analytics now, I have got a little query here which will actually go ahead and pull back the data that I had from Intune. So this has pulled back my data directly from Intune itself.
So those are all the audit events, right?
These are all the audit events which happened in my tenant the past day, because I'm running on a schedule. You can tell that I've been quite busy on my tenant yesterday, tinkering, creating scope tags, deleting apps, etc. But that's just in a table. How can I make this, as you could say, pretty? So if I actually get rid of this command here, the summarize, I can actually summarize the data and get it into a more of a charting format. So we all love charts. I love a pie chart. But I'm going to start off with chart first. And what this is showing you, you can see on the left-hand side, this is Microsoft Intune, the portal. So I've got audit events from the portal. So from the portal, I've been doing some patching, device enrollment. I've been doing some deleting of applications from the portal. But from PowerShell, I've been crazy. I've been doing lots of things, deleting, creating app protection policies. I've been retiring devices. I've been doing loads of cool things.
I thought we were going to see a pie chart.
I'm getting there, Dave. Okay. I'm getting there.
Okay.
So if I jump over to pie chart, which are pretty, now that pie chart is quite boring. That is showing you just 68% has come from PowerShell audit events, and 31% is coming from the portal. But if I change this to display name, I now get a beautiful chart. And this is the activity which has happened in my tenant the past day. The thing is, when you're looking at auditing data, and you're looking at tracking purposes, and especially change control, because I assume everybody in this room has got change control. So when you have change control, is that if you want to make a change to a compliance policy, surely you have to get approval. So the theory is, if you see an audit event in your console, that you should be able to map that back to a change control. So what this is giving you is the ability to show that data. What I can do from there is, if I go back to my dashboard, I can actually create a dashboard. So this is a dashboard. So if I just customize this dashboard, it's the wrong one. if I click this dashboard, I can actually go and customize and make my own dashboards. So I can create some pretty charts. In that chart, it will show you basically in the overview tile, and this is just using built-in log analytics. There's nothing special, and this is the query that I was using here to query to get that data into my tenant. As soon as I log into my tenant, that chart will update if anything has changed. So the theory is, we love theory. The theory is when you go back to your dashboard and you log in the morning, you should see 0 events. I had 51 last night, or from yesterday, somebody's been playing my tenant. So then I could map this data to my change control system. I could then set up alerting to send emails. I could then use some things like desired state to set things back to what they were meant to be if people are changing policies. We wanted to show you what we kind of call the art of the possible. We wanted to show you that you can take auditing data out of Intune and put it into log analytics and then do analysis outside of that. So hopefully that opens your kind of eyes, and this is the kind of cool things that we've been working on. Obviously, there's other third-party integrations that we're working on as well. So hopefully that gives you an eye to how we're doing things today.
And this is all stuff that's available right now. There's no announcing slide that came before this. This is what you can do today.
So the final section. I might take the clicker off, Dave. I like this clicker.
Okay, you're in control.
The power of the clicker. So our automation journey started when we rebuilt our console. So hopefully everybody's read this blog post from Brad. Brad talked about how we rebuilt Intune. And as part of Intune, we decided to use Graph API for our API in the console and our API for automation. So in May 2017, I had the pleasure of working with Dave for 4 months, from January to this time, and we released our first samples on GitHub of how to do this work. But there's always been a but. We've always had this in the back of our mind. How many people use user voice?
Everybody out here's had it in the back of our mind, not just you and me, right?
So on user voice, this was #1 for a long time. One of our beautiful PMs in the back, it took over us with some MSIX and some app installations. So what we'd like to announce is that we're adding support for PowerShell. It's going to be in preview today. It's actually available today for you to use and leverage modules and commandlets for Intune directly. So what we can do, the preview is available on GitHub. So our first release, because we're in preview, we're going to do, I think, 3 or 4 previews.
Yep.
And you can hit aka.ms Intune PowerShell. We're going to show you in a second what you can do. We support V1 graph endpoints only, so these are fully supported modules. And I'm going to show you a demo in a second of how it works. We support parameter sets, so no longer you have to find the parameter set names. You can tab and you can populate parameter sets. We support PowerShell credentials. We support PowerShell pipeline. So we've been doing some great work on this side. And we'd love to get your feedback. One of our amazing developers is in the room today who worked on this. So we can thank Rohit for all his great work. But we'd love to get your feedback on these modules. You can raise issues on GitHub directly. You can contact us. You can tweet us. We'd love to get that feedback. So let's have a look at it in action. And just to let you know, me and Rohit have got a theater session tomorrow where we'll go deep dive into the commandlets themselves.
As much as we can deep dive in 20 minutes, our theater sessions are short this year, so.
It is going to be a whirlwind tour.
But it'll be incredibly demo heavy, right? Did you manage to limit your PowerPoint to an intro slide?
My PowerPoint is
that's all.
There's a few slides.
That's
so
all.
This is our GitHub repro. So this is the aka.ms Intune PowerShell. In our repro, we have a releases tab, which is here. And then you can actually download the zip file directly. So you can download this zip file and then bring it to your device and then start consuming our modules. What we've done is we've done some great work on some documentation. So you can scroll down in our MD file, how you can import the module, how you can discover commands, etc. We've done some documentation in this part of the GitHub repository. So if I go back to PowerShell now, the benefit of this is I can input my module. I can do a straight connect MS graph. So anybody that used our commandlets Used our samples from GitHub. It was loads of get auth token functions. It was really long scripts, etc. Hopefully this will make your life a lot easier. I can authenticate with my tenant. And then that's going to return, very similar to how Azure AD will return my UPN and will return my tenant ID. So now I'm authenticated. So if I run a get command dash module Microsoft.
Before you hit enter, I was going to ask the audience.
It's gone. Dave, it's gone. It's gone.
Okay, I was going to ask the audience if they had a guess at how many items are going to be returned.
Anybody want to guess? How many commandlets do we have in the module? 50.
50? I heard 300. 15, 75. 500.
Keep going, keep going.
I know there's a way in PowerShell to do a count.
So if we run this, and I will do it in a second, so that is all the commandlets we have.
It's still going.
It's nearly there, don't worry. So it's finished. So if I do a pipe measure, 1,287. So the way that we do this, the way that it's constructed, if I do, let's get rid of this, get device management, device compliance policies, that will just list my compliance policies. I would be really hard on Dave and just do a remove, so we do actually support the pipe remove device management, but I'm nice. I won't press the enter button right now. Let's clear that off. So what you can then do is you can then do things like dash select. So select. I can't spell today. Select display name. Yeah, it's just not, as you could think about it, normal PowerShell select filtering is everything is built in the UI. You can also do things like if I take the display name, I can then do a dash filter and then do display name equals the name. So very simple, no longer needing to run scripts, no longer needing to create your own module files. We've created them as part of the SDK, and we're really excited, and we literally can't wait for your feedback on these modules. We've been working hard on these, and yeah, we'd love to get your feedback on this kind of stuff.
So we do have all of your PowerShell scripts that are out on GitHub, and I think one of the things that's important for this audience is even though we have the PowerShell commandlets that replicate a lot of the functionality that's in the bottom of that script, many of those scripts are actually assembling scenarios for you. So still, there's a lot of value in the PowerShell scripts that are there. You may want to go through and replace out some of the commands that are being built in the PowerShell script with the commandlet itself once you're trying out the Intune module. So here's what I want when you leave. First off, you've got all the tools and capabilities to limit permissions for your administrators. You really need to get down to minimal permissions necessary to do their job. And I think now you've got the tools and capabilities for doing that. Second, scope tags. Go try it out, especially if you're in distributed IT, or maybe your IT is distributed within a central organization between your mobility folks and your desktop and Mac folks. You'll have the ability to use scope tags in either of those cases. We gave you the tip of the iceberg on what's available in the PowerShell module, so please take your time, play with that, give us feedback on the module on GitHub, and go visit both Dave and Rohit, who are going to spend some time on, in the theater session on our PowerShell module, just focus specifically on that. Reporting, I think you've got a lot of flexibility in doing custom reports, and I've heard time and time again that Intune reporting is limited. It's not. You have everything available to you to get data out of Intune, either from the operational store that's showing your day-to-day information, or from the data warehouse. It's all available for you there to build, and we'll continue to build out Intune canned reports that you can leverage in the console, plus regular improvements to the data warehouse. And lastly, I think this is the most important point, because what Dave showed there with Azure Automation and your ability to create scheduled tasks and runbooks and PowerShell scripts to go query the service, get the information that you need. We showed log analytics, and it made a lot of sense from your audit data. but you all have day-to-day tasks that you need to basically get that engine room running and purring without you having to go into the console, without you having to run things manually. You now have, and all of this is available for you either via download with the PowerShell commandlets or in the service today. You have the tools today to do exactly all of the things that we've demonstrated here, plus expand that to the rest of your IT capabilities and process. So please take the time, go back, learn and build on all of the techniques and the tools that we've given you here. And lastly, I know that this is kind of the standard slide at the end, but both Dave and I spend time and we go through every one of your evaluations. And I would really appreciate if all of you take the time to give me feedback about whether or not the style of the presentation, the content of the presentation, the timing, the demonstrations, the capabilities, if all of these resonate with you, we'll continue to build it out, we'll make it public. And if it doesn't work for you, let us know. We'll change it for Ignite next year so that you have absolutely everything that you need to go back and make the best out of your IT organization and everything that you do with Intune. Thanks so much for coming. Dave and I will be here afterwards if you want to ask questions. Have a wonderful evening. Enjoy the rest of Ignite.
Yeah, thanks everyone.